Caleb Vance's arrival at the remote Vermont cabin was an unannounced bombshell. Online, the hashtag #VanColeReunion was already trending, a firestorm of fan excitement and vitriol. The producers of Hearth and Home, a reality show about celebrities unplugging from modern life, were undoubtedly pleased. The comments section, however, was a war zone. It was a disgrace, many argued, for the network to rehash a ship that the actors themselves had sunk years ago. Everyone knew Caleb had immediately signed on to a blockbuster romance after their indie film wrapped, a move widely interpreted as a blatant effort to distance himself from the project and his co-star. Fans of Ethan Cole were quick to remind everyone that Ethan didn't even follow Caleb on social media. They weren't friends. They weren't anything. Still, a vocal minority celebrated. For them, the chemistry in that film, Faded Lines, was undeniable. Ethan was on the show to promote his new series, a major comeback after a year-long hiatus. It was a gritty crime drama, but behind-the-scenes footage had revealed a surprisingly warm rapport between him and his co-star, Leo, sparking a new fan obsession. When their agents suggested a joint appearance on Hearth and Home, it seemed like a perfect marketing strategy. Seeing Caleb Vance standing in the doorway, a silhouette against the bright afternoon sun, sent Ethan's mind into a tailspin. Caleb had nothing to promote. His level of stardom was far beyond a cozy reality show like this. The only possible reason for his presence was the one Ethan refused to entertain. He had spent a year building walls to keep Caleb out, terrified of ever again hearing the words that had broken him. Ethan, a man loving a man, it's just wrong. But that fear had faded, replaced by a hollow ache he had learned to live with. When filming began, Caleb hadn't yet arrived. The show's premise required the cast to be self-sufficient, and Ethan, having grown up fending for himself, was a natural in the kitchen. He was quickly nominated as the group's chef. As he worked, turning out a dinner of barbecue ribs, seared salmon with a dill sauce, roasted root vegetables, and a simple kale salad, the live stream's comments were overwhelmingly positive. Fans praised his domestic skills, many jokingly proposing marriage. Ethan caught a glimpse of the scrolling text and felt a blush creep up his neck. His fan base was an odd, fiercely protective bunch, mostly young women who treated him not as a heartthrob but as someone to be cherished. He had once lurked in one of their private forums and was so taken aback by the intensity of their affection that he'd logged out, flustered, and never returned. Leo, who was peeling potatoes nearby, looked up with wide, hopeful eyes as the ribs came out of the oven. He tugged on the sleeve of Ethan's shirt, his voice a playful whine, asking if he could please have just one piece. The smell was driving him crazy. Leo was a year younger than Ethan, an endless ball of energy who, rumor had it, was a wealthy heir just acting for the fun of it. On set, he'd been like a golden retriever, constantly seeking Ethan's guidance. Their first meeting had involved Leo staring at him with undisguised admiration, confessing that Ethan was the reason he'd wanted to become an actor. It was hard not to feel a sense of brotherly affection for him. Ethan grabbed a clean pair of tongs and placed a small rib directly into Leo's waiting mouth. The comments feed exploded. The shippers were ecstatic. But a darker sentiment began to bubble up. Some accused Ethan of being a user, insinuating he couldn't function without a man to cling to. Then came the S. Just wait until Caleb gets here. Keep your distance, Ethan. You're disgusting. Ethan froze, the words hitting him with an unexpected force. He hadn't wanted any of this. A hand suddenly appeared, blocking his view of the monitor. It was Leo, offering a gentle smile and telling him not to read the ugly stuff. Warmed by the gesture, Ethan gave Leo another, larger piece of rib. Just then, a commotion at the front door signaled a new arrival. A chorus of enthusiastic greetings for Mr. Vance echoed through the cabin. Ethan looked up. A tall figure stood in the entryway, and those familiar, expressive eyes seemed to cut through time and space to lock directly onto his. There was a time Ethan would have given anything for that gaze. Now he just looked away, focusing on the cutting board in front of him. The trolls were right about one thing. It was better to keep his distance. In his head, he had rehearsed a cool, professional greeting, a firm handshake and a simple, long time no see, Caleb. "You've lost weight," was the first thing Caleb said, his voice low as he stepped closer. He explained that it had been a long time since he'd had Ethan's cooking. He'd been traveling all day and hadn't eaten. He wondered, with a soft smile, if Ethan might feed him a piece, too. The live stream chat went into overdrive. So they did know each other well. So they had eaten together. The ship, it seemed, was real. Caleb leaned in, his familiar scent wrapping around Ethan like a ghost. Ethan's mind blanked. Caleb had never eaten his cooking. It was the other way around. During the filming of Faded Lines, Caleb had invited him to his apartment several times, cooking for him, treating him with a teasing, gentle familiarity. "Make yourself at home," he'd said. "I'll take good care of you." Ethan looked at him, confused. Caleb's smile remained perfectly charming, infuriatingly so. Ethan hated that practiced look, the one that made everyone feel like they were the center of the universe. He had once believed he was special. He had once believed they would be the closest people in the world. But Caleb was the one who had drawn the line, who had pushed him away. And now, here he was, acting as if the chasm between them never existed. Ethan decided Caleb was simply losing his mind. But he was a professional and he couldn't cause a scene. He reached for a clean plate. Before he could serve him, Caleb leaned down and, with deliberate slowness, took the piece of rib directly from the tongs Ethan was still holding. Ethan's hand jerked in surprise, and the tongs clattered to the floor. Caleb picked them up, his smile unwavering. He remarked that using a plate seemed far too formal for the two of them. Nearby, Leo let out a strangled laugh. Ethan felt a hot flush of embarrassment. Caleb, however, was unfazed. He placed a hand on each of Ethan's shoulders, his voice a low murmur, explaining that since he was late, he would cook the final dish. He asked Ethan to help him with his apron. The request was casual, intimate, creating a bubble around them that excluded everyone else. It was as if the past year of silence had been a dream. Caleb had always been like this, effortlessly taking control. But Ethan was tired of the game. He didn't know what Caleb was playing at, but it felt like a cheap performance. He politely declined, saying his hands were tired from all the chopping. He suggested that Leo could help Caleb with the apron instead. As Leo cheerfully stepped forward, the warmth vanished from Caleb's face. His gaze shifted to Leo, his voice suddenly cool as he stated that it was fine, he had it. The sudden shift in mood was palpable. On screen, the comments flew. The consensus was clear. That was jealousy. Caleb Vance, who was famously polite to everyone, had just snubbed a junior actor for no apparent reason. Suddenly, the old rumors felt real again. Later that evening, the producers announced the room assignments. 2 people per room. As Ethan started to follow Leo toward their assigned cabin, Caleb's hand closed around his wrist. He dangled a key in front of Ethan's face, a corner of his mouth turning up in a smirk. He informed Ethan that he'd made a mistake. They were roommates. Ethan looked toward the director, bewildered. Separating him and Leo defeated the purpose of their joint promotion. But the director simply nodded. Leo grabbed Ethan's other arm. his expression comically tragic as he lamented how much he'd wanted to be roommates with his Ethan bro. He added, with a mischievous glance at Caleb, that an older guy like Mr. Vance probably wouldn't have much in common with them anyway. The dig, however subtle, broke through Caleb's carefully constructed composure. Through gritted teeth, he informed little Leo that he and Ethan had practically lived together for a time a year ago. Besides, he was only 3 years older than Ethan. The camera was still rolling. Ethan felt a wave of nausea. He couldn't do this. He yanked his arms free from both of them, snatched the key from Caleb's hand, and walked away without a word. If Caleb Vance had a death wish, he could find his own doctor. He didn't even want to imagine what the internet was saying now. He had signed up for a quiet lifestyle show, not a twisted romance reality series. That night, after a shower, he found Caleb waiting in the dimly lit room. His face was lost in shadow, but his voice was clear and low. He asked if Leo was the type Ethan was into now. Ethan stared at him, exhausted by the emotional whiplash. He retorted, asking what business it was of his. Caleb ran a hand through his damp hair, a long silence stretching between them. Finally, he admitted that he had sent several excellent scripts to Ethan's new agent, wondering why he'd chosen this particular project instead. Ethan remained silent. Caleb pressed on, his voice softening. He asked if it had to be a man. He warned that it would do nothing good for his career. That was the thing Caleb never understood. It wasn't about gender. It was about a person. He touched the sleeve of his pajama top, feeling the familiar ridges underneath. He told Caleb, his voice cold and hard, that he saw Leo as a little brother. Caleb's voice was hoarse when he replied that he used to see Ethan as a little brother, too. Ethan blinked back the stinging tears. He kept his voice steady as he spoke, the words landing like stones in the quiet room. But I never kissed my brother. The silence that followed was absolute. Much later, after the lights were out, a single, broken whisper floated from Caleb's bed. I'm sorry. Before sleeping, Ethan took 4 of his pills. He drifted into a restless sleep, and at some point, he sensed a presence by his bed. Warm fingertips traced the line of his brow, his eyes, finally coming to rest on his lips, lingering there. The dam he had carefully constructed all day finally broke. A tear escaped, rolling down his cheek and onto the finger resting on his mouth. The taste was salty, bitter. With his eyes still closed, his body trembling, he whispered into the darkness, "Caleb, how can you do this? How can you come back and stir all this up again, as if nothing happened?" He was pulled into a cool embrace, arms wrapping around him with a desperate tightness. A voice, thick with emotion, breathed into his hair. "I've missed you, Ethan. God, I've missed you." The feelings had started during the 10 takes of their first on-screen kiss. Ethan had been cast in faded lines on the spot. The director had taken one look at his lean frame, his background in dance, and the deep, fragile sadness in his eyes and declared him perfect. Ethan, needing money for his adoptive mother's medical bills, had agreed immediately. His character, Jasper, was an orphan, shuffled between reluctant relatives, growing up painfully shy and sensitive. It was a story that mirrored his own bleak childhood so closely that reading the script had brought him to tears. He'd met Caleb Vance for the first time in the director's office. Caleb was even more striking in person than on posters. Handsome, elegant, with an air of untouchable grace, but warmer, more real. He had kind eyes that seemed to hold a natural affection and a smile that put people at ease. When Ethan, trembling, had reached out to shake his hand, Caleb's large, warm palm had enveloped his for a brief, electric moment. The director asked Caleb if the kid was to his liking. Caleb, perhaps sensing Ethan's nervousness, had reached out and playfully ruffled his hair. His voice a low, amused rumble. He'd called him a beautiful kid, perfect for the role of Jasper. The word beautiful, coming from Caleb, made Ethan blush. The film was a quiet, artistic piece about loneliness and connection. Jasper is eventually taken in by Caleb's character, Miles, a man only a few years older than him. Miles was the first person to ever show Jasper kindness, and Jasper, like a drowning man clutching a lifeline, fell hopelessly in love with him. The first kiss scene took place one hot afternoon. Jasper, now in college, comes home to find Miles asleep on the porch swing. Overwhelmed by a tide of love and longing, he leans down and presses a chaste, reverent kiss to his lips. It was Ethan's first kiss, on screen or off. He approached nervously, his own lips trembling as he made contact. "Cut," the director yelled. He told Ethan to find the feeling. Caleb sat up, a laugh barely suppressed. He teased Ethan, asking if he was trying to lick a lollipop. Color flooded Ethan's face. He could see the faint, glistening mark his lips had left on Caleb's, and his brain short-circuited. He bowed repeatedly, apologizing, promising he would get it on the next take. He didn't. They did 10 takes. The director was furious. Caleb's upper lip was pink and slightly swollen. Through it all, Caleb was patient. He put a protective arm around Ethan, telling the director that it was the kid's first time with a scene like this, and he'd work on it with him in private. That night, Ethan knocked on Caleb's.